My name is Jennifer Adams, and I'm 48 years old, and I'm a proud mama of 4 girls. You may recognize my name because I ran in the Kamloops by-election, the last Kamloops by-election. I hope to be able to bring some of the passion that I have for advocacy for housing. Affordable housing is a big deal for a lot of people here. Families struggle to find housing, students struggle to find housing. One of the first issues that I hear from young people up at the university is that housing is very difficult to find and expensive. We need to continue to try to create a safe community for everybody so that people feel safe in all parts of our city, and we need to continue to work to help those that are struggling with homelessness and addiction. We've had a lot of good programs coming online, a lot of funding to help people in need, and hopefully now that means we can gear down and work on collaborative relationships to build more housing, more affordable housing, housing for students, housing for families. I will help in some ways. I think that our city needs to work on increasing bylaws in something called inclusionary zoning. So what that means is that a developer will develop a property and they have to set aside a number of units within a development, or they have to put aside some funding to go towards social housing programs. The city's job and role in a municipality isn't to provide housing, but they can help with the housing crisis by acquiring lands and then working on relationships with social agencies and different peoples in the community to do that. So I think that needs to be a real vision for Kamloops, to continuing on the housing continuum and to keep focusing on fulfilling the needs of particularly students in our community, because they really struggle with housing. And a parking lot up here would be good. Again, housing. If we don't have housing for people, they struggle through to do what they need to do while they're in their studies, and then they'll often leave if they can't attain that. We have a really neat plan, and if you guys haven't checked it out, go on to the City of Kamloops website, because we have a new downtown community plan, which is very diverse and looking at common pedestrian spaces, that sort of thing. I think those things, the back alley block parties and some of the events that we're seeing are really helpful to attract a young, diverse university type crowd. But we need to sort of look at creating opportunities for small business, and I think one thing I hear from a lot of younger people and younger generations, there aren't a lot of venues, so their voice is really, I hear their voice in the need for a performing arts center to be able to bring in different kinds of acts that would attract a lot of the young people to get out and do what young people do. You know, they study hard and they want to get out and have fun and have lots of different things to do. I think a water park would be really fun in Kamloops. Maybe as a city councilor, there's some way I can help find the entrepreneurs to make that one happen. Well, I was really happy when we got the announcement that the Reserve and Sun Rivers was going to be linked up with transit. That's a big piece that will help to bring in different people into our community core. I think Kamloops has a pretty good bus service. We need to increase some routes, and I hear a lot of frustration from people that we have buses that are empty and unserviced routes, so perhaps we could look at smaller routes. We're somewhat limited in the amount of transit hours that we can have because we're kind of locked in under a provincial arrangement on that, but as a municipality we can shake up some of our vehicles that we use, so having smaller buses for less dense rides and more ride share. I pitched something out the other day talking about long-range goals with things like light rail and transit. We just had a big announcement in Vancouver. And those are really future things for me to think about, because actually Terry Lake piped in and said, well, it'll be about 50 years. And I said, well, if we do it 30, then we can have it in our lifetime. But for the young people, these are conversations that they can bring to the table because they want to be able to access the city center. Those are long-range goals, very long-range goals. And I'm way off topic on that. It was transit.
Yeah.
We have pretty good. I like the programs in cities where they have bicycle shares, car share programs are all things that we can look at. I hear a lot of people say that they believe that we need a more robust taxi service and Uber service, particularly at night, you know, in the evenings and after festivities and whatnot. Rental housing in Kamloops has been increasingly expensive and challenging to find, and if elected, I will do my best to use the position. I think there's some opportunity to help link people together. We have Tara Holmes in our community who's like a matchmaker for people, and maybe there's some way we can help link up people who have homes that maybe have room with students. We're going to have to do something until the supply comes online. So we're going to have to get creative and think outside the box. If the city it continues to look at density and increasing density, things like carriage homes. There's different things that municipalities can do, like reducing some of the application fees for bringing on secondary suites and that kinds of things, increasing or decreasing the time that it takes for applications to move forward. Municipalities can do different things to help bring in the current stock that's illegal rental suites and bring them into inspection and make sure that housing is safe for people, because what's happened in our community to some degree is that the affordable units are sometimes units that are unsafe. They're need to be inspected, and because they aren't on the list of licensed secondary suites, we've got issues there. So we need to create an opportunity where it's a little easier and the cost piece is maybe reduced for those to come in. The inclusionary zoning, that's another conversation that I keep bringing up as much as possible, and that's where we have a developer, if he's going to build 100 units, that's great. We used to have to beg for investment to come to Kamloops, and that's really turned around. We're in a position now where we can demand that the housing continuum get looked after, and it isn't and shouldn't be. The reason it isn't a municipal responsibility to provide affordable housing is because our tax base is used for things more like infrastructure. But land acquisitions are important, and inclusionary zoning is something that we can do to ensure that there's adequate supply in any of the things that are built. But it's bylaws that have to be written. So our municipality is good at having some bylaws. You know, a fella can't hold a sign and beg for change. But we don't have a bylaw that says that a developer, if he's building 100 units, has to set aside any units for social housing, and that's where the inclusionary zoning comes in. So you'll hear me talk about it a lot, because I think it's one of the bylaws I think we need to write. I think we could probably get rid of a few, but over the next 20 years, I think we will need to continue to be very dedicated to the housing starts. Sometimes when municipalities grow really quickly, we tend to lose long-range vision, and I think we're going to have to be very dedicated to maintaining agricultural land, looking at increasing our abilities as a community to supply food to our community. We live in very different times politically where we can't rely sometimes on the imports. Cuba has an interesting model that we can follow where, you know, they did find some independence through sanctions and things that were put on them, and they became more self-sufficient. So it's actually a model that I think that most communities could look at, to look at ways that we can create self-sustainability, where as a community we don't have to rely on imports, we grow our own food, we look at more of a local share piece. So it's going to be transportation, it's going to be housing, continuing to grow our university, and economically, I think if we have city leaders that can strip away stigma in regards to cannabis, we have an incredible opportunity available to us to start to look at research, and we have a university here. We can look at, there's a huge expanding market in cannabis, so hopefully the ones in positions to be able to help influence economic diversity, we can look at stepping up to take advantage of that growing market, because it's something that will be providing a lot of jobs in communities. We want our young people to stay here. We want, I have 4 daughters, and I want to make sure that they, can go to school here, get a good education, that the price that they pay for their education is fair. And we have a long way to go with our university being funded properly too. And the young people at the university have done a really good job on bringing light to the fact that there's an $80 million deficit in funding for TRU. So it's not really something we can do as a municipality, but we can certainly lend voice to the stability of our education system, and TRU is definitely the gem of our city in that department. So the next 20 years is all about building our community, making sure that people have affordable housing and accessible housing, continuing to grow our university, and expand our economic diversity. I've had a few. On paper, I guess, technically I've been a millionaire, so that's kind of interesting. I'm not a millionaire anymore. But years ago, I was chosen to sit on a small business advisory council, and Al Rain, who is, of course, the mayor of Sun Peak, sat on the same small business advisory council. So sometimes I use that as a proud professional accomplishment, that I sat on a small business advisory council with Al Rain. So that was an interesting experience, and I've had a lot, but that one comes to mind.